You're listening to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast, episode number 61. So, for today's topic, we are going to be discussing unveiling your authentic self. And I wanted to address this because I feel like a lot of times we don't really know who we are after the divorce or the breakup or emotional abuse. We have been struggling for so long to meet other people's needs. We people please, we have codependent behaviors, we're doing all these things to maybe make other people see our worth or believe that we are valuable. And the problem here is that we lose ourselves in the process. And I remember feeling like this a lot because I was trying so hard to be something that I wasn't. I was trying so hard to be everything that my husband, during our 20-year marriage, wanted me to be. And I never was truly myself. There were times, sure, that, maybe I showed up as who I was, but there were so many times I was scared to be me because I was afraid I was going to be criticized, or I was afraid that I wasn't going to be accepted and loved. So I really think it's important for us to understand our true identity and who we are, because when we have this external conditioning from other people, either from our childhood or from adulthood, it doesn't really matter which, but it keeps us from being who we are. And then aftermath happens and we don't know who we are. We don't know what we like. We don't know what we want. We maybe even have a hard time making decisions. That was definitely true for me. So I'm going to share with you some impacts of this. I'm going to give you some tips and, the role of conditioning and how that plays into this, so that you can actually start to peel back these layers and get to know the true you. So stay tuned for a brand new episode.
Welcome to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to help you heal after a toxic or narcissistic relationship. This podcast teaches you to use your subconscious mind to go from feeling stuck to set free. In here, you will learn how to use the power of your own mind to free yourself from emotional pain, move forward with confidence, and experience the inner peace you deserve in your healing journey after emotional abuse. I'm your host and subconscious reprogramming coach, Allison Dagny. So let's get started.
Okay, so thanks for joining, and I'm going to get right into this. The first thing I wanted to talk about is the impact of how a divorce or a breakup or emotional abuse can shatter an individual's identity. It can also really shake your sense of security and belonging. And oftentimes these kinds of experiences are accompanied by feelings of grief and betrayal and loss, right? So there's so much very complex kinds of things that are going on inside of a person after the divorce or breakup or emotional abuse. And when we have these kinds of experiences and the associated pain that goes with it, then this often leads to a lot of self-doubt, a lot of questioning of yourself, of your worth, of your identity, and who you really are. And there are a lot of common things, and maybe you've said these to yourself, but people hold these ideas like I'm unlovable, or I'm not good enough, or I can't trust my judgment, or I'm a failure. And what happens is these beliefs become ingrained, and then they end up contributing to this really distorted self-image. And that's why oftentimes we don't know who we are, because we go into this relationship a lot of times, if you are in an adult relationship with someone, and you tend to feel really good about yourself. You feel loved, you feel confident. Maybe the other person is even giving you a lot of affirmation and affection. And so over time, when they start to change their behavior and they start to treat you differently and they start to criticize you and devalue you, then all of a sudden we have this sense of confusion. Well, wait a second. Like, I used to feel good about myself and I used to be good enough. So now all of a sudden that's changed. Like, what's happened here? Is it me? Did I do something? We start questioning ourselves, and we oftentimes really beat ourselves up in the process with these harmful thoughts. And so this kind of negative beliefs and these kinds of negative self-talk that goes through our head contributes to this unknowing of who we are over time. And next, what happens is we have this really impactful and scary, truly, loss of identity of who we are. So when we are in an abusive relationship or having these kinds of challenges in a relationship with someone, then what happens is that can strip away the roles and labels that used to define us. So the things that we used to identify with about ourselves start to pull away. So that's where we, a lot of times abuse victims will say things like, my self-worth was eroded, because that's what it feels like. It just feels like this stuff just gets peeled away from you. So who you used to be and who you were, you no longer know who that is. And when this happens, we're starting to feel a lot of emptiness and a lot of confusion, because now all of a sudden we're in like a dark room and we have no idea where the light switch is. We don't know who we are. We don't know what we are. We don't know what we want. We don't know what we like, because of all of the things that were conditioned in us to believe about ourselves. And for some people, this results in like an identity crisis. It creates problems in other relationships with other people. There's nothing positive about someone's self-worth being eroded. And when we are experiencing something like this, and these challenges are coming up because of the self-talk, because of the negative beliefs and our loss of identity, right? Then what happens next is we end up in these thought patterns and we are overthinking things. So rumination is a big one. A lot of people come to me and they have these ruminating thoughts. And the reason these ruminating thoughts happen is because we're replaying painful memories and scenarios of the past. And oftentimes those are leading to self-blame, or maybe in some cases like a lot of anxiety. So the thought patterns and the overthinking are also a piece of this. They're a big part of this, of why, when we are trying to remove the conditioning and trying to remove all of the things that people have told us about ourselves, and then we don't know who we are. And repetitive thought patterns like this can actually even make your sense of self-worth worse and make it harder for you to heal and move forward, because these thought patterns are a continual way of thinking that are eroding your sense of self, eroding your feelings of worth, because you're constantly repeating it. It's like, this broken record that's going the same exact thing, saying the same exact things over and over and over in your head. So when those things are repeating inside of your mind, and these beliefs and this negative self-talk and the ruminating over the painful memories and scenarios, then what happens then is your self-worth cannot be improved at that point. So the next thing I wanted to quickly mention is how, when you are experiencing emotional abuse, when you have had someone constantly try to condition you and program you, how if you don't know who you are and you don't have a good sense of self, that this leads to feelings of isolation and alienation from other people. So you may feel really alone a lot because you don't have a really good sense of who you are, and you may self-isolate. You may, hole up in your house and not go out or not do anything. So you tend to maybe feel things like shame or fear of judgment. So this would cause you to withdraw or to avoid social interactions. And it's really important to have connection and support during these times, especially when we're trying to figure out who we are. Like, I don't know who I am. And so being around other people is actually really beneficial because in doing things and trying things, because then it helps you understand or reconnect with parts of yourself maybe that you've lost along the way. So what I want to do next is try to address these issues so that we can move towards more self-discovery, so that we can figure out who we are and step forward in our healing. So if you're not familiar with conditioning or programming, right? If you've been listening to my podcast for a while now, you understand what programming is. Programming is very similar to conditioning. And I want to explain what this is. So external influences, even the way that your parent looked at you one time when you did a little dance in the living room, right? This can be a part of programming and conditioning. Societal norms, what people feel or say is how things should be or how we should operate. The expectations of our family members, our culture and the pressures of our culture and religion. All of these things shape our identities. And this is why you can see someone grow up in a city and state where you live and a family with specific type of values and beliefs and somebody across the world, and they're completely different. This is why, because all of the things that are happening to us from external sources and influences are shaping who we are. So I want to address also shoulds. The word shoulds. Shoulds imparts judgment, right? So if we are going by what other people say we should do, and we're conforming to the expectations of other people, these are the shoulds, right? The judgments. Oh, you should do this or you should do that. Just the other day, I was thinking about something because I saw an Instagram reel about marriage and how people automatically make assumptions about, well, not assumptions, but I guess they have expectations of what should happen in what order, right? So you go to high school, you then go to college, you graduate, you start dating someone, you've been dating for a few years, you get engaged, and then you should get married, and then you should have kids, and then you should do this, and then you should do that, and have a job, right? All of these expectations of the world and how people should be, right? These are things that we call conditioning. These are things that we call programming. And until we actually stop, like put the brakes on and say, hold on, should I actually be doing that? Is that something I want to do? Am I just following along with what other people want? Or is this truly what I want? So this can go for anything. So whatever you are hearing in the back of your mind that is conditioning from other people, whatever you maybe haven't even thought of that is just running on autopilot in your head. You got to grab that stuff. You got to stop it in its tracks and say, wait a second, is this actually something that I want? Or is this something that came from my religion? Or is this something that came from my parents or from my teachers or from my abusive relationship? So should I actually do this? Is this something that I really want to do? Is it good for me? Is it going to benefit me at all? So when other people have conditioned us, then what happens is we are adopting personality traits or behaviors that don't align with our true selves. And this has been major for me recently because I have had to really think about, why do I do that? And is this something that I really want to do? I mean, there was something very, very silly the other day where, well, this was a while ago. I was keeping track of the bills in a certain way, and I was doing it, and it seemed like a lot of extra work. And I stopped myself and I thought, why am I doing it this way? Well, the reason why I was doing it that way was because for years, my ex-husband told me this is how I need to do it. This is how it should be done. And I had just adopted that behavior and was continuing to do it without question. So I'd really encourage you to, like, everything that you do, start to question it. Like, why do I do this? Why do I even park in this particular kind of spot at the store when I go to the store? Why do I? Do I do it because I want to be closer to the store? Do I park further away because I don't want somebody to hit my car? Like, just question it. Just start to question why you do the things that you do. Because what you'll start to notice is that some of that stuff and a lot of it didn't come from you. And so when we're trying to unveil ourselves, like find out who we truly are, we got to start questioning it, because if we don't, we're just operating on other people's expectations of us. So if we're going to unveil our true identity, right, uncover who we truly are, we have to peel back the layers. We have to uncover the conditioning and all the things that other people have made us believe about ourselves, about how life should be, what we should do, what we should wear, how we should look, all of the things that you could probably make a whole entire list of what other people think we should do. And I have a free workbook for you. It's a deconditioning workbook to help you start to make subconscious shifts. It's totally free. I will link it down below in the show notes, but you can also get it on my website as well. Just go to www.whentearsleavescars.com, or you can always email me or message me. I can send it to you. So we're going to talk about, the process of how we're doing this, how we peel back the layers, how we uncover our true identity and sort of decondition ourselves, because most people don't really even know that they've been conditioned. Most people are just kind of going around throughout their lives, just doing the same things they've always done, believing the same things they've always believed without question and without any sort of challenge to those things. So let's talk about first how we can recognize these behaviors and these patterns that are a result of this external kind of conditioning. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen, it would be great if you could write this down, because it will help you. You can come back to it later. And this step is really, really crucial for reclaiming your authentic identity, for knowing who you truly are. So if you're someone who is gotten out of an abusive relationship, who's experienced a lot of shoulds in your life and conditioning that you now are saying, oh my gosh, the light bulb is on, like this is me, then I want you to know that you can reclaim your own identity, but you're going to have to start by figuring out what's on autopilot. So the autopilot behaviors, the autopilot thoughts, the autopilot reactions, these are things that may not reflect who you truly are. These may just be things that have happened to you over the course of your lifetime that have been on such a repetitive, habitual pattern that it's just not even been a thought in your head. So first you want to engage in a lot of self-awareness. And the first thing I do with my clients, after the very first time that we talk in our very first session, their homework is to start observing their thoughts. Literally, I'm not making them do anything major aside from just get into the habit of thinking about your thinking. So we have our first session and I tell them, when you're going about your day and you experience an emotion, I want you to just feel it. Like, where do you feel that emotion? Do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your head? Do you feel it in your hands? Like, don't judge it, just feel it. Like, where is that emotion? And then that's your signal. That emotion is your signal. So you then observe the thinking. What is the thought behind that emotion? What are you thinking about? What specifically are you thinking about? You don't have to write it down. You don't have to do anything with it. You just have to start paying attention. Self-awareness is so key, right? And it's key for everything, but especially if you're going to try to figure out what your true identity is, because you feel lost or you feel confused, or you don't know who you are or what you want, then start there. Start by figuring out what the thoughts are behind the emotion. And the other important part is not to judge it. So if you think it, it's okay. Nobody knows what you're thinking, right? You can think it. You think whatever you think, and just be aware of it. Just know that this is something that's passing through your mind and through your body, and just be aware. So here's what I want you to write down. Start asking yourself some questions. Here's a great question. Why do I believe this about myself? And then just write down all the things. And then another question is, where did this belief come from? And what you'll do here is you'll start to look back at the interactions that you've had with other people, the experiences that you've had in your life, the traumatic events, and then basically pinpoint where this belief actually came from. And remember, a belief is only a thought that is not 100% true for 100% of people 100% of the time. And I learned this from my coach, Diana Johnson, who runs the Thought Work Institute where I got certified. This belief came from somewhere else. A lot of times, the beliefs are just external conditioning, external programming. The other question is, does this belief truly align with who I am? And you can do this for behaviors too. So, why do I do this? Where did this behavior come from? And does this behavior truly align with who I am? So, you don't want to stop at, like, let's say you said, does this belief truly align with who I am? And let's say that you inspect that and you say, no, it really doesn't. You don't have to stop there. You can keep going. Well, what behaviors would align with who I truly am? And how can I put these behaviors into practice, right? It's just question after question after question. You know, sometimes people believe that questions are an indication of maybe that you don't understand something or that you should be smarter. But no, questions are the key to unlocking your subconscious mind. Truly. A lot of people think that, you know, when you do this work and when you're trying to figure out what's in your subconscious mind, that you have to like dig really deep and you have to go layers and layers and layers down and, you know, pull up all the old stuff. No, you really don't have to do that. If you listen to someone, and let's say a friend has come to you and they're really struggling with something, and they start venting to you, you will hear all the things that person believes. And most of the time, it's a judgment. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Sometimes people think there's something wrong with judgment because that's part of our conditioning too. Like, you should not judge people and things like that. But judgment can also be a really good thing. It can also be a way of discernment and for us to be able to determine if something is good for us or if something is bad or if it might harm us. So judgment isn't always necessarily a bad thing. It can protect us a lot. So, okay, I sort of went off on a tangent on that. But really, going back to these questions, what do I believe about myself? Why do I believe this about myself? Where did this come from? Does it really align with who I am? These are all great questions. And you just keep asking more and more questions. So there is a step here that you're going to have to take, right? You can listen to me talk on this podcast all the time, but unless you sit down at your kitchen table or at your favorite spot in your living room or on your bed or wherever you decide to do this and pull out a notebook and put it on paper, it's just going to be swirling in your head. It's not going to actually change anything. So getting to the source of why you believe these things, where they came from, and all of these assumptions about yourselves and your choices and your behaviors, really getting to the root of that is going to unlock a lot of revelation for you. All right, so the questions are great. Another thing that you can do is trace the origin back, like figure out where these behaviors or beliefs really originated from. And it may be something that happened to you when you were a child. You know, if you grew up in a family that, let's say, didn't have a lot of money, and you knew your parents were struggling, and you could tell because they were stressed out all the time and your parents were working really hard, but it was like paycheck to paycheck every single week, and you barely had anything to eat, and you're worried the electricity or the water was going to go out. You know, there may be an origin of belief about money stories or things that Now, all of a sudden, as a little child, you've adopted. You may have heard your parents say, like money doesn't grow on trees, or don't waste things because you never know when you're going to get your next meal. Or, maybe you believe things like you have to work really hard in order to make ends meet, or whatever those things are, right? All we're doing here is we're just tracing back the behaviors and beliefs to where they originated from. We're just finding out where it came from. And knowing where it came from can oftentimes help us see a little bit more clearly, because then we can say, well, is that true for everybody, or was that just my family? Were other people experiencing this, or just my family? So, and this can go for lots of different things, right? So anything that you are making assumptions of about yourself or about other people or the world or your choices or behaviors, you want to kind of figure out where the origin came from, because it will help you understand yourself a lot better. And what it also does is it stops that in its tracks, because when you figure out where something came from, you can now look at it sort of objectively and say, well, I see that this came from here, and I understand that that's why I have these beliefs now, but that doesn't mean I have to continue to believe these things. That doesn't mean I have to continue to carry these automatic thoughts or these automatic behaviors or beliefs around with me for the rest of my life. So I want to share one with you that I carried with me throughout my entire life. When I was a little girl, I was very well behaved. I was very well liked, teacher's pet. All my friends' parents just adored me. I was a good kid. I had good grades. I didn't do bad things. Like, I was a really, really, really good kid. And inside of me, I had this belief. I know this now because I traced it back. But I had this belief that people in authority, or people who were at a higher level with me or than me, people who were older than me, were either more important than me or should be respected, or, I had thoughts like, you shouldn't talk back to adults. And so, of course, these kinds of beliefs were shaping how I was showing up as a child. That I took into my adulthood. The same exact things happened to me. I was a very good employee. I didn't rock the boat. I was very, by most accounts, polite and respectful. And I'm not saying those things are bad. They're not. But what I'm saying is the belief systems that I had since I was a child had me putting myself last, because for some reason, and I had this belief that people in authority or people with letters behind their names or degrees or whatever were smarter than me, were better than me, that I was inferior. And so what happened was I was always sacrificing myself. I wasn't speaking up. I wasn't setting boundaries. I wasn't doing any of those things because I felt inferior. Even my ex-husband had more educational background than me. He had a higher job than me. And so I was always putting myself in an inferior type of role, like in my head. And then that showed up in my life as I was continually going on and on forward in interactions with people. But when I really started to challenge these beliefs and these thoughts in my head that people with, higher degrees or people in a higher level positions than me or with more education are somehow superior to me, when I started to challenge this, and I did this through this 4-step process that I teach my clients, I use it for myself too, that's when I immediately started to shift how I felt and then how I showed up. So I was feeling confident and feeling secure in who I am and knowing who I am. And then I was also able to act differently. I was actually able to change my behaviors, and I wasn't like self-sacrificing or, putting myself last or, putting these other people in these higher level positions and allowing them to get away with things that I shouldn't have been allowing them to get away with. So take a minute to trace back your behaviors and your beliefs to the origin. If you are doing something and you notice that this is a habit for you or a belief habit for you, try to ask yourself, where did this come from? And trace it back to some event or some sort of conditioning from your life. Now, this brings me to a different piece of this, which is external versus internal motivations. Okay, so if your choices or your actions or your beliefs are driven by external or internal, right? So like external validation from other people or your own internal motivation or your own internal values, right? We have to decide, is this actually driven by the external or the internal? So for the example that I gave you for myself, when I was a child, there was an element of me seeking approval from other people because of my programming, because of the conditioning that I experienced as a child. I really couldn't pursue what really brought me joy and fulfillment. I couldn't really speak up with confidence. I couldn't see myself as equal to others because of the programming and conditioning. And then I carried that with me throughout my whole entire life. So, for me, having this understanding of whether I was operating in my adult life from an external validation reason or an internal motivation was really, really eye-opening for me as an adult, because again, I could trace it back to the origin. So I could trace it back, but I could also see that my behaviors and my even my thought behaviors and my thought beliefs were approval seeking. They were externally motivated. It was about what other people would think about me. It was what other people would believe about me. Oh, she's such a good girl. She's such a great student. Oh, yes, we want her, blah, blah, blah. Right? I needed that validation because I didn't have that level of self-worth inside of me. I wasn't conditioned with that level of self-worth. So for me as a child, carrying that into adulthood was really a harmful thing, because I ended up in a relationship with someone who was emotionally abusive, and I didn't know who I was, and I was constantly trying to, again, seek that external validation, that external approval from him. And as you've probably heard me say in other podcasts, that the more that I did this, the more that I tried to appease him and make him, happy. It was really me just trying to get validation for myself, like that I was good enough. So this all goes back to knowing who we are, knowing our true selves. And if you're taking these steps, if you're doing these things, what happens is we're just peeling the layers away. We're just peeling and peeling and peeling away layers like of an onion to find out who we truly are. Because if we are behaving in ways that we are conditioned from like early childhood or in these relationships, we're not actually showing up as our true selves. Now, do I believe that I am a good, kind-hearted person at my core? Yes, I do. And I was like that as a child as well. But I also know that I am strong and I'm confident and I'm brave and I am able to speak my mind, and I don't have these fears anymore. I used to have those fears. But because I know that all of that stuff was conditioned into me, that I can change that now. And that's what I want to help you with as well. Okay, so there's another thing I want to touch on, which has to do with, us not knowing really who we are. And this is the comparison of ourselves to other people. And you probably heard this phrase, comparison is the thief of joy. And I really love that quote. I don't even know who said it, so I can't quote who said it, but I didn't say it. Comparison is the thief of joy. But I believe that that is true, because the more that we are comparing ourselves to other people, the less satisfied that we are, because we're basically saying we're not measuring up or we're not good enough. So those subconscious beliefs keep repeating themselves. Social media influences this as well, because we're seeing, all these heavily filtered people. We're seeing, celebrities and the media and, people's wealth and their relationships. And, we're then being inundated with this stuff. And so we're comparing ourselves to what might not even be real, what might not even be reality. You know, a lot of times we see these things and we think it's real, and it probably isn't. But when we're comparing ourselves to other people, then what this can also do is it makes us believe certain things about ourselves, and then we may adopt behaviors or beliefs that really don't align with who we are and our true identity. So if we're trying to figure out who we are, we've got to stop comparing ourselves to others. And it's important for you to be mindful of your social media usage, the accounts that you follow, the people that you interact with. So when I first started my social media account, I wasn't a coach back then. And I was, posting a lot of stuff about narcissism and, covert narcissists and things like that. And I was connected with a lot of these same types of accounts. And what I noticed was after I started healing and after I started, really diving into self-discovery, that a lot of those accounts really didn't align with me anymore because they were repeating things that were holding on to negative stuff. And I was really trying to move away from that. So social media can really affect you in certain type of ways, and it can affect your mental health, what you're seeing on repeat. Like, are you following, positive, uplifting types of things, or are you following accounts that make you feel bad about yourself? Are you following people who are constantly flaunting this or that, and it just makes you feel bad about yourself? So really inspect that as well, because we can't know who our true selves are if we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people. All right, the other thing is self-expression and how to explore that. So activities and hobbies and interests and things that you have for yourself is really going to help you with your identity and learning about who you are. So if you've been in an emotionally abusive relationship, if you had a very traumatic upbringing, or you had a lot of trauma in your life and you have your self-worth stripped away and you feel like that you've been conditioned and all these things are resonating with you, then exploring who you are has to be part of the equation. Because without testing things out, how do you know, right? How do you know if you really like something unless you test it out? If your whole entire life you were made to believe that you weren't good enough and that you'll never measure up and that you should be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that, all these things, right? If you never take the opportunity now to try out new things, or see if you like to ride a bike across the neighborhood, or if you like to have a pumpkin spice latte, or if you actually want to get new bedding for your room, like if you don't try something out, how do you know? I say this to my kids all the time when it comes to food. I'm like, you have to try it, because how will you know if you like it unless you try it? And you don't have to eat it, but you got to try it. So really exploring new things is going to be super, super eye-opening when it comes to what you like, what you want, and helping you understand who you are as far as your identity goes. Because the one thing that I know is that when I left my abusive relationship, I really struggled with who I was. Like, I didn't really know who I was. I knew some things, like had some kind of core values that I believed about myself, but I didn't really, on a base level, know who I truly was, what I was capable of, what I wasn't capable of. And it's okay to admit, right? It's okay to say, like, I can't do that, or I'm not comfortable with this, or that's not me. That's okay. But the point is, you've got to know. And one of the best ways that you can figure this out is to try things out and explore, right? So I'm not just talking about like, do you like coffee, or do you like going to bed at 10 o'clock, or do you like to meditate, right? No, I'm talking about even things in self-exploration that have to do with your values, So, trying new things can help you discover these aspects of yourself that may have been suppressed due to conditioning throughout your life. And this was specifically something that happened to me in my marriage because I was always trying to be what my husband at the time thought that I should be. So I ended up adopting all kinds of, I don't know, behaviors and habits and hobbies that he liked or that he wanted. So he was big into hunting. So what did I do? I joined him on hunting trips. He really wanted to dabble into beer making. And so what did I do? I dabbled into that with him. So because I was, I think, also trying to create connection in our marriage, I was willing to do things and try things that I probably otherwise really wouldn't have wanted to do. And now that I'm not with him anymore, I don't do those things because I don't actually like them. I don't actually enjoy them. So things that I like to do creative things. I like to do art projects and puzzles, and that's more up my alley. I don't really want to go hunt animals and make beer. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because for me, it was all about trying to make him happy in the relationship and do the things that he wanted. And I'm glad I tried some of those things because it actually did give me some clarity to know that that's not really me and that's not really what I want to do. But I also want you to take a look at these things. Like, are there things that were from your childhood that maybe your parents really liked for you to do? Like every holiday, they got together and did a specific type of ritual or a specific type of tradition. And now as an adult, you're like, I don't like that. I don't want to do it, and I'm not going to do it. Thinking about these things, right, from your relationships, from your childhood, you can take those things and determine if those are things that you actually want to keep doing or not. And then you can also look at the things that you value, the things that you like, and the things that you really want to do or incorporate into your life that may have been suppressed due to conditioning, or because people told you that that wasn't okay, or that because you grew up in a family of people who were really math oriented, that you should really focus on that instead of focusing on doing art projects, right? So what aspects of yourself have been suppressed because of your conditioning? So take a look at all of those things to help you along your journey of trying to unveil your true identity and who you really are. So if you want to reconnect with yourself, your true self, then it's important to know that being authentic, right, because that's your true self, is going to help you connect with who you really are. So here are some things that you can do to reconnect with your true, authentic self. Number one, as I'm always going to go back to, is being aware of your thoughts and feelings and behaviors. So going back to what I said for what I do with my clients, when you experience an emotion about something, that's a little signal to you to pay attention to what you're thinking. And just let that thought pass through without judgment. The next thing you can do is journal. Some people are like, oh, I don't like to journal. And, I used to not like to journal either, but I love journaling now because it gives me so much insight and realizations into my own self. So even if you just write a little bit every day or every other day, journaling is about exploring yourself, exploring your thoughts and emotions. You can vent in journaling, and a lot of times that will also unlock some things inside of you. But I do suggest keeping a journal to help you so that you're not just keeping it all inside your head. Journaling, putting pen to paper actually slows down your subconscious mind. And so you may end up with a lot more revelations if you put pen to paper. And then another way to reconnect with your true self is through self-compassion. And this is really important, and this is something that I emphasize with my clients as well, but you need to treat yourself with kindness during this process. When you're trying to learn who you truly are, if you're beating yourself up and telling yourself negative things all the time, it's going to be really difficult to actually come to who you truly are, because you're basically, what you're doing is you are criticizing your trueness in your true self. So be compassionate and be kind with yourself, and try not to judge yourself, because the more that you can do this for yourself, the easier it will be to unveil what's underneath of all that conditioning and what's underneath, like, who you truly are. If you need more help with this, again, as I mentioned earlier, I have a deconditioning workbook. It's a free workbook that I created so that you could print it out and start reading through it and filling out some of the answers to the questions to help you get to the origin of your conditioning and to also start to question some of these things. And this can be a really helpful tool for uncovering these layers of external programming, external conditioning. And all you have to do is go out to my website, or in the show notes, there will be a link and you can click that in there. The workbook has a lot of information to help you understand this on a deeper level. Plus, there are some thought-provoking questions that I'm addressing, and then some practice for you to uncover your own subconscious beliefs that have come from the cultural and societal and parental conditioning that happens to everyone. So we all have this conditioning, and it's important to just realize and understand that there's nothing wrong with you if you've been conditioned in a certain way. It's just, if we want to get back to who we truly are, we have to start removing some of these layers. My coach describes it like if you were a blank canvas when you were born, and throughout the years, layers of paint just got put on top of that canvas. Over the years, it starts to build up, more and more and more layers of paint. And so what we're doing to decondition is we're just taking away those layers one by one. We're just peeling back the layers to get back to the true you, to who you truly are, that blank canvas. And you get to write on that canvas, and you get to say who you are. So if you want this workbook, go out to my website or just click the link below and you can get it for free, and then you can just start practicing. Okay, so just as a quick recap, we are always going to be programmed or conditioned in a certain type of way, and we all have been. And this external conditioning and how it influences us and shapes us into who we are, the expectations of others and the shoulds of how we should behave, all of that is contributing to our current mental and emotional state of being. So what we want to do is peel back the layers. We want to uncover that conditioning, and then we want to reconnect to who we truly are and do action things like mindfulness and journaling and trying out new things and testing out new hobbies and things like that to help us throughout this process. So thank you so much for being here, because I know that if you're listening, that means you are on a personal growth and recovery journey, and I am so very proud of you, because there are so many difficulties when it comes to this, and I want to just try to make it as easy as possible. So thank you again. If you have any questions, any suggestions that you'd like me to cover on this podcast, my DMs are open. You can always message me on Instagram or Facebook. You can email me at allison@whentearsleavescars.com. And don't forget to go get your deconditioning workbook on my website. So thanks so much. I love you guys, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for being here with me today in the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast. I hope you found value here with me. If this podcast episode was helpful to you, I'd love for you to hit subscribe and leave me a review. My goal is to help you go from feeling stuck to set free. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and you can check out whentearsleavescars.com for more resources and information to help you with your own emotional abuse recovery. Until next time, here's to believing in